And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight I'm delighted to welcome a brand new guest to the program, but not a brand new name, Jim BUONOCORE. And my guest's dad was my football coach at New London High School, and I had the privilege of playing on his first team as a sophomore back in 1969. And so that goes back a day or two. But I'm joined tonight by Jim BUONOCORE Jr., but I don't think you used the junior. You just kind of.
So yeah, that's a great one. In terms of a popular question. So I have a different middle name. My middle name's Michael. His middle name is Charles. So technically, I'm not a junior, but from the day I was born, I was a junior. So I just, it just stuck. But
well, I'm a junior, but my mother had a way of the inflection in her voice. We could tell between who she was talking to, my dad or me.
Well, my father speaks highly of you to this day, and so I know you were a big part of his ability to come into New London, in 1969 as a head coach and begin obviously one of the most successful high school coaching careers that the state has seen. And it's always that first class which I think really sets a tone for a head coach and their ability to create a culture and make their mark in that program. And I know he was very fortunate to have a great group back in '69, and you were one of them.
Well, it was like I say, a privilege and a pleasure. I mean, I loved high school football, and your dad is head coach, and the staff he had put together with Joe McNeil and Gil Vargas, who we just recognized a couple of weeks ago on his 80th birthday over at Langley's. That was a nice afternoon.
Yeah, that was, thinking back to those days, and, it seems like it was just yesterday. I was born in '73, so, I grew up, at New London High School. I remember, getting out of school, elementary school, the bus wouldn't take me home. It would take me to New London High School and drop me off there. And then I would spend the rest of my afternoon and evening, whether it was at football practice or hanging out in the weight room and going to a basketball game at night. It was a great way to grow up. I was very fortunate being around great, not only student athletes at that time, but as you mentioned, some of the coaches. Joe McNeil and Gil Vargas and Ed Favalis, Larry Keating. Those are just individuals that have had impacts on thousands and thousands of young people. And I was fortunate to be one of them.
So true. And you graduated New London in what year then?
1991.
1991. Well, I've got you beat by a couple of days. And but I played with Tommy Major and Kent Rayes, Timmy Lewis, Reggie Wheeler. Some names from the past.
Yep, some of the greatest players, to ever wear the green and gold. I watched Kent Rayes kick a 49-yard, field goal on film. Reggie Wheeler make some, unbelievable catches. Had the pleasure of, working with Kent later on in life. Kent actually coached with me at Stonington High School. He was one of my assistant coaches. And obviously Tommy Major goes down as, the topic of, could he be possibly the best high school player in New London history? And there's some really, really, really good ones. Well, that's a whole nother conversation that we could have.
For my money, he certainly is right up there. If not the best.
There's some great ones, but it was a great childhood growing up. And just being around some terrific people, some terrific role models, not only from the coaching standpoint, but from also the athletes.
Yeah. Well, one of Dave Campo was a coach at New London when I was first year, and I think he had the freshman squad. And I think that was the only other head coaching experience he had until he got the Cowboy job.
Yeah, Dave, I got the pleasure to meet. I was a graduate assistant coach at Springfield College, and I had been, in contact with Dave as I was getting ready to graduate from Springfield, and I was interviewing at multiple schools, mostly throughout the Northeast, for graduate assistant positions. I ended up staying at Springfield, where I had played as a grad assistant. And in between my first and second year, Dave brought me to training camp. I served as an intern at the Dallas Cowboy training camp. I worked with the defensive backs.
That's about a thrill.
It was tremendous. Mike Zimmer was the defensive back coach. That's a name I think you might be familiar with. He served as the Minnesota Vikings coach most recently. Coach Campo was the defensive coordinator. Barry Switzer was the head coach at the time. And I had a tremendous experience, working with, Darren Woodson, Brock Marion. Those were guys in the secondary. Darren's probably a guy that, should be in the Hall of Fame fairly soon. Billy Bates was still playing at the time. Deion Sanders was on the team, but he was playing baseball with the Reds. But what an experience, not only from just, getting a chance to interact with, other college coaches that were serving as interns, and then, of course, Dave and his staff, but, just learning more about the game, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. It was really just a great education in the sport of football. You never stop learning, but that was really, really special. The most important thing I learned was we came up to Foxborough for a scrimmage, preseason scrimmage against the Pats, and I made the mistake of walking out of the locker room very close to Barry Switzer. And as some things started to get thrown at him from the stands, I got hit. So I learned at that point, stay away from Coach Switzer. But it was a great experience, and you go back to relationships, and I was able to get that opportunity because my father had given Coach Campo an opportunity, and he never forgot that, and and that was his opportunity to give back and to give me that opportunity, and that really set the tone for me. As I continued on, I stayed at the college level for a couple more years, and then I went back to high school and took the head coaching job at Stonington. Really knowing at the time,
at what point did you know that you wanted to be a coach? I mean, at New London, you were a quarterback, correct?
I played a multitude of positions. I played quarterback, flanker, free safety. I was the punter and kicker. So I did a lot of everything.
And then when you got to Springfield, you were strictly a receiver. Is that correct?
I was a receiver and I punted. So I was the punter. Some years I punted a lot. I think one night we played the University of New Haven. They were ranked 1 or 2 in the country. They had a running back by the name of Roger Graham. He was the Harlan Hill winner, which is equivalent to the Heisman Trophy for Division II. And I think I set the school record that night with 15 punt attempts. My senior year, we were outstanding. We had a great year. We had a great group of guys. But, so I was the punter and wide receiver. I also played baseball at Springfield.
Oh, really?
Yeah, played baseball for Coach Charlie Roy's. And, it was a great experience to be able to play 2 sports at the college level, and, certainly helped with my time management on the academic side. And, I enjoyed 2 sports. I enjoyed playing 3 sports in high school, but, obviously that wasn't going to happen in college. But, so
it's rare to get 2. I mean,
it is rare, and it's difficult. It really was. It put a strain on the academic piece. As you, in the spring, you're leaving campus at noontime every day, for games. So your afternoon courses, you just have to have a good relationship with your professors and make sure you're able to, make up the work that's, necessary in order to matriculate on. And
Springfield's no slouch school there. You've got to do the work.
Got to do the work. You got to do the work, and there's a lot of hands-on training as well. I was a physical education and health major, so a lot of your time is going into schools and actually, kind of getting your feet wet in terms of teaching. So you do some student teaching experiences, and I did a few up that way. Commerce High School, right in downtown Springfield. Agawam High School was where I did my full student teaching experience. Forest Park Middle School. And by, trying to work it out with the football and baseball schedule, I actually did the main portion of my teaching during the football season because, I would get up, go to school. I was at a high school. You'd work till 2 o'clock. You get back on campus. You get to the training room. We're on the practice field at 4:10. So it worked out. Baseball, as I was saying, you're off campus at noon, on most days traveling, to games. And so, it was definitely a heavy balance, but I wouldn't have traded it.
Okay. Now, for those who may not know, Springfield College is a D3 school.
Yep.
And I got to tell you, I enjoy watching our local D3 schools, basketball in particular, Mitchell, Con, and Coast Guard. The quality of play is really, I think, a lot better than people understand. They ought to go and watch it. But my point being is, when you were coming out of high school, were you being looked at, or were you considering, or was your goal or aspiration to be a D1 player or play D2, or did Springfield just kind of become a good fit out of the gate?
Yeah. Springfield was a Division II school at the time, so when I arrived at Springfield, we were playing in the Northeast 10 Conference in baseball, and in football we were playing AIC, CW Post, East Stroudsburg, Southern Connecticut, Central Connecticut, New Haven. We actually transitioned to Division III as I was entering my senior year. The school had made a concerted effort at that point, financially, that it was in the best interest, for the institution to go to a Division III level. The travel, the number of Division II schools, in the Northeast, particularly in the sport of football, were, decreasing. Obviously, some of us were on, what they would call grant money. So it was, similar to scholarships. It was an athletic grant. So they were getting away from that, and so they turned themselves into a Division III school, which, quite frankly, I think was a really, really smart move, because now at this point, they're a school that I think is a powerhouse on the national scene, across all of their athletic offerings.
They're in the same conference with Coast Guard.
Yes. Yep. So my senior year, we actually I got an opportunity to come down, and I played against the Coast Guard, at the Coast Guard Academy.
How about that?
It was a great experience. Unfortunately, my father could not make the game because they had a game. He was obviously still coaching at New London, but my mother was there, and she was my biggest fan. She was at all the games. He was still coaching, so he was able to, probably get to more baseball games, in the spring when I was at Springfield College. He didn't get to many football games.
He was not big on night football, as I recall. And just purely selfish. I happen to like Friday night high school football because it allows me to go to college football on Saturdays. And I love college football. I'd go down to Yale or Brown, Harvard, Connecticut, Holy Cross. It's just, I love it. And go down to West Point. It's terrific.
Yeah, that's a beautiful stadium.
Oh,
and it's what a great just the atmosphere. You go down there, the 9 o'clock, parade and up to the stadium. Terrific.
I never get tired of that. Never. And I've been doing it for 20 years.
It's funny you say that, because when I stopped coaching after the 2015 season, I said one of the first things I'm going to do is go to West Point. Like, I want to be a part of that game day experience, and that was everything and more. It was tremendous.
Yeah, you get the parachuters and the parade of cadets and the whole kit and caboodle. It's terrific, and a football game.
Yeah. I think that the day I went, they played Hawaii. But what a tremendous experience. But no, you're right. He was a 1:30 Saturday afternoon guy. That's what we all grew up on, in New London. So playing a Friday night game when we were in high school was like a special experience. Back in '91, East Lyme had lights, Montville had lights, St. Bernard. I think Waterford just had gotten lights. So, we were kind of that, rare Saturday game. But when we got to go on the road and experience that, it was always pretty special. Now it's, everybody's got lights.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't recall what year it was, but we schedule a scrimmage, I mean to say, Wyndham, under the lights. That's the only time playing under the lights was a scrimmage. And a team who had, unbalanced line and all sorts of screwy stuff. And it was interesting.
I bet. Yeah, and back then the lights, I mean, a couple poles and 3 or 4 bulbs, and that's what you were getting. So you get some of those teams like Wyndham, they're running the wing tee and the misdirection, dark jerseys, you can't see the football. It was definitely difficult. The lighting, I would say, at most schools now is a lot better.
Yeah, I think so. But like I say, that was the only time to play under the lights. And as a lineman, it really didn't make a whole heck of a lot of difference. You just got to not take that guy out.
Yeah.
But after your experience as a kind of an assistant or graduate coach at Springfield, your first head coaching job, which, as you noted earlier, was at Stonington. And how long did you work at Stonington? Because if I recall, the program had been struggling. You came in, and I think you kind of got things turned around pretty quickly.
Yeah, we did. So I was a graduate assistant at Springfield, and I was fortunate enough to coach on both sides of the ball. My first year, I was coaching the defensive backs. That's on the side of the ball I interned with Dallas. The next year, I coached the halfbacks. I had played on the offensive side of the ball. I was involved in special teams as the punter. So when I left Springfield, and Coach DeLong, who played a huge part in my life and my development as an athlete and as a coach, I'd asked him about taking a high school head coaching job, and when do you know if you're ready? And he goes, you're never ready. You just need to take the job. But he said, if anybody's ready, you're ready. So I took the job, and as you mentioned, I think they had won one game in the last 30. All right, so they were struggling. I was very fortunate to walk into, and as I mentioned about you and your class and what my father was able to experience in 1969, I think 30 years later in 1999, I was able to experience that same thing. I walked into a group of young men, Blake Jensen, Kyle Smith, Andrew Caron, Chris Grady, just a great group of young men at that freshman level that were followed with some guys like, Mike Mello, who ended up becoming a scholarship player at the University of Maine. What people don't realize is after 4 years, we had, won almost 30 games, had been to the state playoffs twice. We won 2 Eastern Connecticut Conference championships, and I had 4 kids that were Division I football players out of Stonington High School. Who would have thought that? It was a quick turnaround, and I had a great staff, and we did a heck of a job, but we had some players too, and it was a lot of fun. That was a really great town, and it was really neat to experience that turnaround. I still remember, the headlines after we won the ECC championship, and it said from worst to first. And, just a real neat thing to take that group of young men who, when we first started, we had to teach them how to celebrate. We literally would say, okay, we're running plays on air, and we would finish in the end zone, and then we celebrate. This is what we do, guys, when you score a touchdown. Like it was that bad. But what a great group of kids, great group of coaches, great town, and it was a tremendous experience to turn that thing around. And
did you develop your own staff, or did you inherit a staff and work with that group of men?
So there was some guys that had been with my father. Bob Nenna came over, and he coached our freshman team. Jose Pasta Santabria, who was with me at all my stops. He came over. Of course, my father, who had retired from New London, he came over as an assistant. Jeff Ziegler, who was an outstanding offensive lineman at Montville High School, All-American at Plymouth State, who I actually played against, and his dad was the longtime athletic director at Montville High School. He came over. John Turner was the one individual who I kept from the previous staff, and John was just, what a tremendous resource of information. And when you walk into a town like that, you got to have one guy, right? One guy that you can go to get all the answers, to know who's who, what's what, and he was my guy. Mm-hmm. And he was tremendous for me. So, you got to surround yourself with good people, and we talked about relationships already, and you got to have people that you can trust, and that was all part of it. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, you got to have players, and I had some players. Maurice McClellan, was a Division I player. Mike Mello, Blake Jensen. My quarterback was Colin Clancy, who played at Temple. It was a really good 4-year run.
Well, I'm debating on where to take this here, because there's many different directions I'd like to touch on here. We've only got limited time here. We're going to have you back a few times here. I would like to just delve into, when you mentioned the D1, in that not all guys who are playing, or athletes, whatever sport it may be, at the high school level, are D1 talent. At what point, as a coach, is it your responsibility to try to get them to the next level and at the right place at the next level? You played D2. You didn't go to Ohio State or Notre Dame. I mean, you went to Springfield, and that worked, and it's working now for you. I mean, it was a good place to be, where you were able to play and hone your skills and develop those relationships that you're using to today.
I think that's the biggest thing, in my current role as an athletic director and assistant principal, and no different than when I was a head coach, is just trying to educate the student athlete on finding the right fit. It's not about level. At the end of the day, if you're playing football, basketball, baseball, soccer, track and field, competition is competition. And at some point, sports is going to end. You need to be able to walk away with an experience that educationally provides you with the proper degree, and you've given yourself the ability to build relationships with people that can help you throughout the remainder of your life. I always tell kids, think about if you got hurt and you couldn't play. Do you still want to be on that campus? Do you still want to be, in that particular major? Do you still want to be living in that, region or area of our country? Like, when you're selecting schools, it's got to be more than, athletics. 2% of all high school athletes get an opportunity to earn money that's directly related to athletics. 2%. It's not many.
No,
it's not many. It's
so
very
when you
rare.
watch the kids, though, I mean, they all have the dream of being, the next, Michael Jordan or that big stud or star that's going to be the multimillionaire, and they're few and far between. I mean, New London has had a plethora of outstanding athletes, and there's less than a dozen that you could name that have played professionally. Yeah. And how many broken dreams and folks have come back or wandered away and haven't really their apex was high school athletics, where it should be being a businessman or a doctor or a lawyer, teacher, or whatever it may be that they're going to do.
Yeah, high school athletics is our primary objective is to provide an opportunity for young people to develop the necessary traits and skill sets in order to be a successful adult. That does not mean you're going to be a Division I athlete. We like students to matriculate on and continue to, participate in athletics at the collegiate level, whether that's junior college, NAIA, Division III, II, I. To me, you're going to find a tremendous challenge at any of those levels. One thing I was just talking today with a colleague whose son plays Division I baseball, and we were talking about pitching, and going back to the conversation we were having when we transitioned at Springfield College. I played the majority of my baseball career in the NE10, so you're talking about New Haven, Quinnipiac, Bentley, Bryant, Merrimack at the time. Well, as we were transitioning, we were also playing the Trinities, the Wesleyans, the Williams, the Amhersts, the Eastern Connecticut's. I always felt I was seeing better pitching, when we were playing those Division III schools.
Really?
They're bringing in great talent, and some of those kids are trying to, pick schools that give them that balance of academics and athletics. You really can't just say it's about the level. Certainly in football and basketball, yes, the majority of your professional athletes are going to come from Division I schools. But I think as you work away to some of the other sports, you're going to find some great hidden talents that are playing at the lower levels. But I always tell kids, don't think that D3 is just a last resort. You better be prepared to
Well, I think some
compete.
of the kids underestimate the D3. I mean, at every level of college ball, all the students that are playing were all conference, all state, captains of their team.
Yeah.
You're not getting the 12th guy on the bench playing at any level
No.
of college sports. I mean, and if you go and watch the locals now, I mean, the quality of the play is challenging. And
Yeah.
I mean, a local young man from New London, Mike DeMoro, lobbied hard to get him into Con, and Doug Henton, and he was a good high school player, and he was good enough to play on the Con team, but he was not. He didn't start.
Right.
And I think it was a bit of a, geez, I'm D3, I should be able to kind of walk in and be a stud. And guess what? There's good players.
Great players. And when I was coaching at Springfield, when you're a graduate assistant at Springfield, you're coaching your own position, you're running your own meetings, you have a recruiting area. Coach DeLong would send us out, and I usually had in my years there the state of Connecticut all the way down to the Gold Coast, and I'd bring back my guys, I'd bring back my film, and you got to see this guy coach. He's tremendous. Who's recruiting him? Do you think he's a fringe 1AA player? At the time, it was 1AA. It wasn't, FCS.
Yep.
Can he play at Maine, Rhode Island, New Hampshire? Is he on the possibility of getting offered at those schools? Those are the type of kids that he wanted us to recruit. So to your point, if you're not somebody who is a significant contributor on your high school team and, doing great things, it's going to be tough for you to play at the next level. And that's where high school coaches, need to be upfront. They need to be truthful. They need to be honest. And they need to make sure that their athletes and parents understand that process and how difficult it is to matriculate on and play at the next level.
Yeah. Now, from Stonington, you matriculated to Fitch. Is that
I
correct?
did.
Now, how long was your stint at Stonington?
4 years, and I also served as the athletic director. And that was through after the 2002 season. So really, it was around June 2003. I had finished up spring football at Stonington. Had a really, really nice team coming back. Colin Clancy was still only a junior. He was the quarterback who ended up at Temple. And I made a very difficult decision. The Fitch job had been open. I had turned it down a couple times. It just wasn't what I thought was a good fit. They came back with a teaching position where I was actually going to be making more money than I would be making if I stayed at Stonington as the athletic director and head football coach.
Okay.
And then I had the lure of a school that was twice the size, a roster that was going to be twice the size. And I went to Fitch, and I was there for 5 years. And, again, tremendous experience, met a lot of great people, worked with a lot of great people, ran a football program at a much higher level. When you talk about the number of kids you're dealing with, the number of...
Well, it's a bigger school.
Yeah.
A lot more potential athletes.
Well, I went from running a program of 50 players in 2 levels to running a program with 125 players, and I had 4 levels.
Uh-huh.
I went from a staff of 5 to like a staff of 15. So, it was a great experience. And then, the Ledyard position had opened after Coach Mignault had retired, and that's where I ended up. And
You stepped in for a legend.
I sure did.
Stepped in for Lombardi.
I sure did. They say you always want to be the guy to follow the guy that follows the guy, but I'd rather follow the guy. I mean, it was a great opportunity. It was a program that I think we kept running at a high level. I think we did a lot of great things. We ended up appearing in 3 state championships, won multiple league championships, and then I went on and took the athletic director position and eventually the assistant principal position as well.
Yeah. Now, how long have you been out of coaching?
So my last season was at the conclusion of the 2015 season.
And that's in football, correct?
That was in football. So I was a head coach for 17 years. It's like dog years, Marty, dog years.
It's a good run.
It was a 365, 24/7. If you're doing it right, it's not the August to November that people see. You're in the weight room, from December on. You're going to winter passing leagues. You're going to spring passing leagues. You're bringing your kids in at 6 a.m. during the summer. You're taking them to college visits. Part of your question, is it a coach's responsibility? Absolutely it is. I'm driving kids around to college visits, or I got college coaches coming in. You're running youth camps. It's a lot. And so after 17 years of doing that, I was tired. And I knew I was tired going into that 2015 season. And we had a great run. We ended up 10-2. We lost in the state semifinals down in New Fairfield. And I remember walking off the field, and my wife had come out and said, how you doing? And I said, I think I'm done. And, I felt like at that point I had exhausted myself of everything. People ask, do you miss it? Do you miss it? Well, I missed it a lot right away. And as each year goes on, you miss it a little less. I look at myself now where I coach coaches. I coach coaches, and I get to have a great impact on student athletes across the board in all sports as the athletic director, and also in a behavioral and social way as the assistant principal. But coaching coaches is fun. It's a little different than coaching kids, but you're still coaching.
Yeah. But you're also now involved in the Eastern Connecticut Conference, the league that represents, in essence, the 2nd Congressional District. I mean, this is a huge geographic area. I went on the website. I don't know if there's 18 or 19 schools of varying sizes and localities. I mean, from farmland in North Stonington to urban areas in Willimantic and London and Norwich. Then you go up almost to Massachusetts. I mean, it's and over to the Connecticut River. I mean, it's a huge area, and different size schools and different. I suspect that each school has different sports that they are better at than others, or things do ebb and flow. I mean, things aren't always constant where you're going to be good forever, but and trying to make everything mesh. I think it must be daunting.
Yeah, daunting. That might be an understatement. The ECC, probably the most diverse high school athletic conference in the state of Connecticut, without a doubt. And you mentioned all the reasons why. Probably the most, difficult aspect to juggle is the one where you mentioned, you have one of the largest schools in the state of Connecticut in Norwich Free Academy, all the way down to one of the smallest schools in Wheeler High School. To me, high school sports in our state, travel, not a big deal. It's a small state, which is why I think like our high school, football alliance works, because we can schedule great games. And, so what? You're going to travel, 60 to 75 minutes versus 10 or 15 minutes. If that means it's a better game, we need to make that happen. But when you talk about school size, and that's where in the ECC we struggle a ton, you talk about, well, how can you create competitive matchups? How can you create, schedules that make sense? How can you provide for your league member schools, with full schedules, or at least close to full schedules? And I think that's where we've made a lot of progress as a league over the last 7 to 9 years. Because back in 2014-15, our league pretty much broke up. We had 7 or 8 schools that applied to the NCCC. We had a couple that applied to the Shoreline. There was 4 of us that at one point, New London, Ledyard, East Lyme, and Fitch for one day. I think I still have the tweet. I put it out there. We've officially left the ECC, and we've formed the SCAC, the Southeastern Connecticut Athletic Conference, kind of a throwback to the old SAC,
okay,
if you will, when it was New London, NFA, St. Bernard, and Fitch.
Right.
So the 4 of us formed the SCAC. We kind of got back to the table, and we came up with some ways where we could make this thing work. And part of it was moving schools up and down, depending upon strength of program, not locking schools into a particular division, maybe just because one gender was, very, very good in that particular sport and the other gender wasn't. I'll give you a great example. New London at the time. New London girls basketball wasn't always as good as we know it now, right?
Yeah, the last 10 years has been quite a run.
Quite a run. Before that, they struggled. Well, the boys were great. But what the ECC did was, well, if the boys are in the large division, the girls are in the large division, because if they're home on Tuesday night, the girls got to be away. And we created schedules that didn't make sense. Now we create schedules where you might find opposite genders in opposite divisions. And, if we schedule out and they're both home on a Tuesday night, well, the athletic director's got to make it work. And, we're doing more work to create more competition.
Yeah. And are the ADs responsible for scheduling?
So we have a scheduling committee, and there's about 6 or 7 of us that are responsible for, scheduling out. So, for example, I'll schedule football. Scotty Elliott from Lyman does boys and girls basketball. Phil Orby from New London does baseball, softball. So everybody does, their part. We follow a matrix. We follow policies that we've set within the scheduling. Football, I have a little more leeway just because of our involvement with the State Football Alliance and making sure that we schedule out, a few games there for our league member schools.
Out of conference?
Out of conference, yeah.
That's important because to be competitive at the state tournament level, I mean, if everything's here on the eastern side of the river, I think there's a competitive imbalance that it does not prepare our better squads for tournament play.
Yeah, Marty, that's actually kind of really what saved our league was the State Football Alliance, because when everything started in 2014-15, a lot of it was centered around football, Ledyard, we were really, really good. So I took a lot of heat because I was playing in Division II in our league. But at the same time, I was playing with all the schools that I'm competing for at the state playoff berth. But I was still going up and playing all the Division I's. But our success, year after year caused a lot of animosity. NFA started to become very good. So all of a sudden, no one wants to play them because they're big. So, it started to cause issues. And so by going into that state football alliance, we kind of kept that league together, because now I only have to give NFA 6 games from the league, because I'm going to go to the alliance and get them 4 Class LL schools to play to fill out their schedule.
Now, do they choose those schools, or do you?
Our football alliance committee does. So there's representatives from every league that's in that alliance at the table. So we'll sit there just like we're sitting around now, and we'll have data, and I'll have all the data on my ECC schools, and we'll talk about this school was 6-4 last year. They had 62 kids on the roster, 20 are graduating. Their JV team went 7-1. The starting quarterback and running back is returning. And we try to match we try to match teams up and provide games that are going to be competitive for the kids. And so we put that effort and emphasis into it. And we kind of do those types of things at the league level now in all of our sports, which I think is a good model, and one that I hope the state starts to look at, in regards to state tournament play, where right now, for the most part, many of our tournaments, you're just lumped in according to your enrollment. And as well as I do, that's not always, the definition of, equality.
No, I mean, sometimes you get athletic mismatches. I mean, it's just not fair.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want to look. I'd rather look forward than look back. But I mean, as a kid, when I was playing, we were in the Capital District Conference playing against the Hartford schools in New Britain. And the local schools, we didn't really play a lot of them. We played Norwich and Fitch and Waterford and St. Bernard's.
Yep.
And that was it. I mean, we scrimmaged Ledyard. And how things have changed over, I hate to say it, 50 years, where now the competitive balance in our region is much more balanced. Where the other schools, I mean, the East Lymes and Stoningtons, Ledyards are all playing in one league and competing. Things ebb and flow. Some teams will, Montville as well. And it's different. And, we don't necessarily play the Hartford schools as much as a period. I don't think we played them at all. I mean just anybody in the region. But I see more competition with the Hartford schools and New Haven in recent years. Am I imagining that, or is that?
You're not imagining it. So first off, the CDC, the Capital District Conference, that goes down as the best high school conference ever that will be. And I mean, you talk about athletes and teams and, rivalries and games. That was unbelievable. And I remember that from being a young little kid. Whether it was East Hartford, New Britain, Weaver, Buckley, that was wild. But no, you're not imagining it. Matter of fact, Weaver we brought into the ECC as a football only school just last fall, and they're returning this year as a football only school.
Now, do they run their own football program, or is it a consolidated team?
They are running their own program, so they just restarted their program, and what had happened was they had wanted to enter the CCC, which makes sense geographically for them. But the CCC, which is the Central Connecticut Conference, would only take them if they came in for all of their sports. So Weaver High School, has gone through a dramatic, change. They have a brand new building, brand new facilities, but it had closed for a little bit. So they're kind of reopening. They restarted the football program. They didn't feel they were ready to enter all of their athletic teams into the CCC. So they got into the Capital Region Athletic League, the Crawl. Crawl is not a football playing league, so they needed a home for football. Football is not a sport where really you can be independent. You're not filling a schedule if you're independent because of leagues and then because of our state football alliance. We're going to fill everybody else out at that table. So Weaver was looking for a home 2 years ago, and a buddy of mine, Harry Bellucci, he recently retired. He was the head football coach at Hartford Public. He was a PE teacher with one of the coaches at Weaver. So he had reached out, knew kind of we were in a league where, our dynamics were a little different. We were small to large. We did some creative scheduling, asked what I thought about Weaver joining as football only. I said, yeah, I'm throwing an application in. We'll take it to the table. And it's worked out good for us.
How about for them?
For them, they had a tough year. It was their first year playing, varsity football. But what I did see from them, and I told Sterling, their athletic director, as the year went on, they got better. They got better. And I'll tell you, before, you look back to the late 90s, early 2000s, Weaver was a team playing in state championships. They were a state-level team. So I think as their school starts to build up population-wise, and I think if, the kids start, getting back into the culture and playing again, I think that school has the opportunity to become very, very good and hopefully stay with us, because that's the type of program we need in the ECC, a medium to large level type program to help with scheduling.
Yep. Has name, image, and likeness started to percolate into the ECC and high school athletics in Eastern Connecticut?
It really hasn't, Marty. The closest that I heard of it, around here was in Newington. There was a really, really good girls basketball player, and I saw her play in person because they played at our place at Ledyard this year. And she was outstanding. And I heard that there was some NIL, situation with her, and whether she had gotten it cleared through the CIAC. And but no, I really haven't, come across any situations as of yet. That's certainly, not to say it's not going to happen. I do think it's inevitable.
Wow,
it
it
will.
Scares the hell out of me.
It will.
I mean Mike DeMora was sitting where you are, probably a half a year ago or so, and he brought it up and discussed it. I mean, he just, I'm not even comfortable with it at the college level, never mind having it trickle down into the high school level, which means sooner or later it's going to be into the middle schools. I mean, it just, and some of the younger kids can be, a stud when they're 12 or 13 or 14, and then everybody catches up in terms of size and their maturity and athletic ability.
No, I think you're right. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. I think you're seeing, that natural progression of things that have occurred at the college level. It usually is a couple years behind at the high school level. So, we talk about recruiting and transfers. At the college level, we've watched that happen since the, invention of the portal. And kids being, able to, leave from one school to the next. I think you're seeing
without sitting, they move and play.
They move and play. I think you're seeing more student movement at the high school level than we've ever seen before. To find the right fit or play for
I don't necessarily think that's going to change, but being old school, I just don't like it. I mean, I just kind of grew up with the community you're in. You go play for that school and go to that school and rah-rah for the hometown team, wherever that hometown may be, and the colors
and I think a lot of us feel that way, and that's kind of the era that we grew up in. And now what you have is, you have schools of choice, which, whether it's a Catholic school, whether it's a school that has an agricultural,
magnet programs,
magnet attachment, such as New London. But you also have, when we were growing up, you played Little League, you played Babe Ruth, you played in your Park and Rec program, you played Legion baseball. We talked a little bit about Jimmy O'Neill earlier. We played Legion for Coach O'Neill. Now, none of those exist. You play AAU, you start traveling from the time you're 6 years old on. Yeah. So these kids are getting introduced and meeting people that are, connected to wide ranges of schools and coaches, whether it's at the public school level, the parochial school level, or the prep school level. And so, you might think you have an outstanding 7th or 8th grade student in your town. Little do you know he or she's playing for some travel team whose coach of that team is a prep school coach, and next thing you know, that kid's going to prep school. It's happened. I watched it happen, So there are so many different tentacles now that are in high school athletics from what we knew back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that really it's one year to the next. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in our league in basketball, as the summer unfolds and, kids start looking for new homes, coaches are changing. Basketball seems to be that one sport where you get a lot of movement.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned basketball because at the college level, it seems like some of the old school coaches that have had extraordinary success are retiring because they don't want to deal with this stuff.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Whether it's the Boeheims or the Jay Wrights or whatever. I mean, you're getting a younger, more resilient and dynamic level of coaches because you almost have to be. You can't be, as I say, you can't be looking back. You got to look this way, and this is what the rules allow for. You got to abide by the rules.
Well, I mean, you look at what's going on right now at Colorado. I think Coach Sanders has had 56 kids transfer out. I mean, you're talking a whole 85 scholarships. There's going to be a whole new roster there, and it's wild to really think of how it's changed. And so, point being is, I think you're going to start to see, that type of situation, continue to work its way down like most things do.
Yeah.
And we'll be dealing with that at the high school level as well.
Yeah, very good. Amazingly, we've run out of time. Our time is exhausted. We're going to have to come back and continue this conversation.
Anytime.
But I want to thank you. This has been terrific.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back sometime soon. Say hello to your dad and
Absolutely.
your mom for me. They've been very, very good to me over time, and I really admire them both.
Well, they're huge fans of you, so.
Thank you. Folks, you've been watching City Focus. I've had Jim BUONOCORE on for my guest tonight. It's been a terrific conversation, and we'll see you next week. Good night.